Hello, everyone. If you've been joining us on our CALM, Caregivers Are Learning More conference sessions, welcome back. If this is the first one you've been able to join, welcome. And be sure to get the replays. Replays and additional material will be sent out afterward. If all throughout November, at the USC Family Caregiver Support Center is celebrating you and National Family Caregiver Month with this CALM conference. I'm Paulina Milana, here to guide you through all of our incredible sessions that speak to this year's theme, which is the art of balance. This is the 24th year that the Los Angeles Caregiver Resource Center is presenting this special suite of events, meeting family caregivers wherever you may be in your caregiver journey and helping you navigate your path with tools, education, support services, and so much more. I encourage you to explore all we have to offer by visiting our website. You'll see the URL on the screen, losangelescrc.usc.edu. Now, today's session is all about essential caregivers and 360 degrees of activism. We've got experts, Dr. Monica Zell, clinical assistant professor of medicine at the Keck School of Medicine, and Kara Barton, MSW, LCSW, and clinical instructor at the Keck School of Medicine. Both are going to lend their expertise from one side of the fence, so to speak, in our family caregiving kind of experience. We also have family caregiver authors, also experts in their own rights. Mary Barbado, Susan Shoemaker, and Karen Klink. They'll be sharing their experiences and insights from the other side of the caregiver fence. Now, we're going to be working today at bringing down the fences, building those bridges, and working together to bring about the best in a caregiving experience. We will be taking questions, so jot them down or put them in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of session. Also, remember that the family caregivers on all of our sessions, they all join together to author a book called The Caregiver Chronicles. You can see it over my shoulder here. Now, LACRC has made it possible for you to possibly get a free copy through a random drawing that we are doing. All you have to do is share a gem that you may have heard at any one of our sessions, or invite some of your folks on your own social media platforms, right? Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Tag us, grab a screenshot, and email it to us. You'll see the email right there on the screen, lacrc-com@usc.edu. And then we'll be putting everyone into a hat and pull out some names for a free Caregiver Chronicles book. To open up today's session, what I'd like to do is ask a couple of questions of everyone who is listening. So type the word me into the chat if you are essential to your care recipient's well-being. But if sometimes maybe it feels as if no one's giving you credit for your caregiving expertise. So go ahead and type me into the chat for that one. And on the second one, I'm going to ask right off the bat, type the words for sure in the chat if caring for someone else maybe sometimes feels as if it comes at the expense of caring for yourself. So give you just a couple of seconds to go ahead and do that. And just to let you know, you are not alone at all, right? And that's part of why we're having this session. This entire November is to let you know you're not alone and to help you find more balance in your caregiver journey. So, to do that, what we want to do is start off with our family caregiver authors, Mary, Susan, and Karen. And I'm going to ask each of them to come on introduce themselves, let us know a bit about them, a bit about the chapter that they authored, their stories, and really to give them an opportunity to talk about their feelings about this topic, the essential caregiver, as it relates to finding balance. So take it away, ladies.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mary Barbato, and I wrote chapter 15 in the Caregiver Chronicles. What I wrote about was myself being the primary caregiver for me after experiencing a traumatic brain injury, and how that prepared me for being the caregiver to my father with dementia. As, As far as how this topic relates to me, we really are essential caregivers. Whether you're caring for yourself or for somebody else, you are giving all of what you can give. And when you're giving all of what you can give, sometimes there's not enough space to give back to yourself. And it is essential because you're not able to survive if you don't find that balance in your life. You want to give your all, and in order to be able to do that, you really do need to take care of yourself. And even when it hurts, to walk away, it's something that you have to do.
I guess I can go. I'm Susan Shoemaker. I wrote chapter 2, Trying to Break a Link in the Chain, Living with and Learning about Mental Illness. Um, I've been a caretaker for a few generations, um, a retired nurse, and I chose to write about my great granddaughter. She came to live with me when she was 4. She's 22 now, and she developed mental health illness while she was living with me. And this was not unexpected because my daughter also has mental health illness issues, and her father did as well. And just a story about, realizing that she needed my help, and just because I wanted to share this story with other people, because sometimes this issue is not too easy to talk about, and just how I found a little balance and we kind of made it work.
Okay, am I supposed to start? Okay, I'm Karen Klink. I am a daughter, an essential caregiver, an advocate, and an activist, and all of the above. Um, I a caregiver for my mom who has dementia, who lives in long term care, and um, when that happened 6 years ago, that became kind of my cause, and I've been fighting for. So I'm trying to take that word out of my vocabulary for my mom and others like her since then. Especially became active during COVID. I became a part of a grassroots group called the Essential Caregivers Coalition. We felt that we should be allowed in, that we were essential, we were necessary to take care of our loved ones, and that has been an ongoing cause for myself. I have a special bond with my mom, and I always have, and even before she had dementia. And now, I often know her better than she knows herself. So I think it's so important that family or chosen family or whomever is willing to take the time um, needs to be part of their care recipient's life.
Now that is awesome, and I really want to thank you all for having the courage to share your stories, right? Not just in the book, but here, live. And what I heard were a couple of little things: giving all you can give, but not giving back to yourself, right? What Mary said, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people. Making it work, what Susan said, right? How many of us are like, well, I'll figure out a way to make it work, right? And then Karen, and talking about, advocating, advocating for your loved one, yourself, at the same time finding this balance. And I'm thrilled now because not only will we continue to hear from all of you as we go on, but we're going to bring on now Kara Barton to actually talk about life as a balancing act. So, Kara, thank you so much. Looking forward to what you have to share.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Kara Barton. I'm a social worker at Keck USC, and I'm here to talk about balance and the essential nature of caregivers, as we heard. And my role at the clinic is multifaceted. Although I am a clinical social worker, I do mental health counseling, I do resource and referral, I manage our mental health waiting list. I field the referrals for whether we can see them in the clinic or not. We work with families and caregivers and patients who have neurological conditions. So many of the neurological diagnoses that are out there, and have experience in my own personal life with either supporting other caregivers or being sort of a caregiver from a distance for some family members. So it is definitely something that is eye-opening. And I do feel like my role as a caregiver is to talk about the things that most people don't talk about. So I just want to appreciate the care providers that just spoke for their bravery and honesty, and also all of you for showing up today. Because if you showed up, then you're tuning in, and it's hard to do. It's hard to give yourself time to do what you need to do. So let's look at the next slide, where I just like to look at balance as a constant effort of movement. It's not static. So you don't arrive at balance. Balancing isn't something that happens and then you just, smile for the rest of your life. Balancing is a constant micro movement of adjusting. And sometimes it can even be like a mindfulness practice where you can stand. If you have balance issues, you can stand with a wall behind you and just stand and notice how your feet and your legs are constantly micro adjusting to keep you balanced. And sometimes we lose balance and we lean a little one way or another, or we need to be caught, or we need to sit down. And sometimes we have better balance than other times. So it's not as if it's some kind of arrival point. Next slide, please. So when we talk about caregiving, I hear from a lot of people that it feels selfish to think about themselves, or it feels like they're supposed to be selfless in order to care for other people. And I think we need, as a social worker, I look at systems, and I think it's really important to think about, where do you come from? What are the messages in your family, in your culture, in the culture at large about caring for other people? In a lot of environments, women are expected to do all of this labor. In some religions, it's also sort of supported to martyr yourself to the greater cause. But I like to put forth this idea of self-preservation. So as a care provider, you are taking care of someone else, which means you're part of a system that needs to be well taken care of. It's kind of like a car where, if you don't take care of the belts, one of them is going to bust and then the car won't work. So, we can neglect these little things, or if you don't put gas in, you run out of gas, all those kinds of metaphors. And self-preservation is personal, and it's different for everybody. So some people need time by themselves. Some people need to leave the house. Some people need to see their friends. Some people need to be in nature or go to their religious environment or community. It's that balancing. It's finding out, how do you nourish yourself so you can keep going. So I just like to introduce this concept of self-preservation. It is not selfish to care for yourself, and it's not healthy to give yourself away so there's nothing left. Next slide, please. So we live in a culture that really loves youthfulness and energy and independence. And we don't talk a lot about aging and illness. And it's called ableism, where we focus on, if you're healthy, we want to participate with you. And if you're not, we don't want to think about it. And we certainly are not very good at planning, or do we have the resources necessarily to plan or the support systems to plan? So aging and illness are part of being human. So if you're going to move through the different stages of life, if you're fortunate, you're going to have experiences with aging and illness in your own body and with the people around you. And these are changes that happen involuntarily. If we joke about birthdays and getting older, but, think about the option. What is the other option? Not being here. So if we're getting older, changes are going to happen, and because we fetishize youth, we think, everybody wants to be the 100-year-old running the marathon, but that's just not the average person. So we need to think about what's going to happen as we change. And it's a challenge to who we are and our sense of who we are. And it's a challenge for us as care providers, but also for the people we're caring for who are losing their sense of self. We're based in Los Angeles. I've had people say to me, if I can't drive, I don't want to be here. Driving is an essential part of people's identity and sense of freedom and capacity. And so, think about the things that make you who you are. And if those things are threatened, it is an identity crisis. And so part of aging and illness can be an identity crisis. And you'll have new needs and responsibilities. So as the person receiving care is losing capacity, whether it's temporary or permanent, their needs and responsibilities are changing. And then if you're the care provider, so are yours. And I liken it to learning a new language or moving to a new country. And you show up, just like having a baby, you show up or get married, and there's no booklet. You can buy books, but nobody hands you the manual for how to do this. And so it is really challenging. And a lot of it's unspoken. So sometimes you're caring for people who don't willfully want to let go of things or understand what's happening. And then there can be power struggles. And, a lot of people handle grief with anger or denial or resistance. And so it can be really challenging. The changes in roles and expectations, you may be an unwilling caregiver. I think we just have to name that in this room, in this space, that some people are showing up because they have to. No one else is doing it. And then the layers of years of family dynamics can show up where, the people that show up, the people that don't. And then the dynamics maybe that you were able to avoid when you left the family of origin may resurface. And so with these role changes, there's a lot in flux. And then ultimately, safety first. We want to avoid a crisis. And so sometimes when you're in this new territory, you don't even know what to look for, what to plan for. But you are entering into this world, and keeping your person safe and keeping yourself safe to avoid a crisis is really helpful, because crises disrupt everything, and then it can lead to long-lasting more troubles. So averting crisis can be important. Next slide, please. So this new territory is learning new languages and roles and systems, learning to ask questions. Some people have a really hard time not knowing things. And it's okay to admit, I've never been here before. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. How can I get help? Who do I ask? Who do I even ask? So finding the resources that are available to you. So if you're here today, you found the LA Caregiver Resource Center. You are off to a great start because it's a resource center that has a wealth of information for you and can guide you to other resources. Understanding boundaries, understanding the roles of people who you are interfacing with in the medical systems, in the, insurance and medical, and, all of these issues around having a right to talk to people. So as a social worker, people have ideas about what I do. I don't do case management, so I'm not going to tag team with you and call all the people at your insurance company for you. Unfortunately, I wish that I could, and I wish that insurance companies had people to do that with you and for you. So understanding the limits of the system, and also when I make phone calls to a patient and somebody in the household answers, because of HIPAA, I can't just talk to you because you tell me you're the wife or the mother. And understanding these limits and understanding, release of information and all these new ideas that maybe you never had to think about. And then assessing your support system. So like I mentioned, these issues show up in your life. So whatever kind of family you're in, whatever kind of dynamics are going on in your interpersonal relationships, understanding who are the helpers and who are the people that aren't going to show up. And sometimes, who's going to write the check? Like somebody may not be in town helping with the day-to-day lifting, but maybe they can send some other kind of financial support, or, maybe they have legal contacts or something like that. So understanding who can show up to do what. And then becoming a learner, just opening up. I'm in new territory. How do I figure this out? Next slide, please. So the essentialness of caregiving is that you are bringing support to somebody who can't function independently like they used to. And so you are one of the experts. You are the insider. You're inside this system at home with this person, or, monitoring their home. And you have important parts of this picture to contribute. So we, as being in a medical setting, need to have a better understanding of what's going on for the patient. And I often see patients who kind of perform into being the good patient, right? I cannot tell you how many caregivers has said to me, he can't do anything at home. We go to the doctor and he's walking down the hall and everything's fine. And like, you're going to get an A from the doctor, right? You're going to get graded. You're my best patient. So there's this dissonance that can happen with reporting and then what's actually happening when you're in the doctor's office. And, in a healthy medical system, medical providers are listening and asking for this information. And you may also have a struggle with the person who's the patient, who doesn't want you in the appointment. So these are dynamics that need to be thought about, because you have input that can be valuable for the safety and health of your care recipient. You witness the issues that this person is experiencing. And I find with some of our neuro conditions, particularly, there can be a lack of self-awareness when these people are sick with these conditions. What their body feels like it's doing and what it's actually doing are not the same. And so having this extra pair of eyes on the situation can be super helpful. And then you're part of a network supporting the care recipient. Are you the only one? Are you one of many? Do you all agree? Is there conflict? So addressing that so that you can get the support that you need to be able to keep a healthy support system going for the care recipient. And then without you, the whole system could collapse. So it goes back to that self-preservation. If you martyr yourself for the greater good and you die of a heart attack, everybody loses. It all collapses. So keeping healthy, sustained care going for yourself is a way of providing for the person who needs the help. Next slide, please. And just before we open to questions, I ended on that word help. You know, in our culture, everybody is really big on volunteering and helping, but we are not good at receiving help. And receiving care is a skill, and we are not good at it. We love independence, and then we think if you need help, there's something wrong with you. But the truth is, we wake up every day depending on entire systems of people to show up and participate, to truck the food into the market, to harvest our food, to weave our clothing. We are interdependent. We just don't like to talk about it. So thank you for listening today, and I hope there was something in there for you that feels helpful and supportive.
Yeah, and I think those are great questions, and maybe we wanna tackle some of them, right? So, family caregiver authors, how do you feel after hearing what Kara had to share? What's been your experience? Let's open this up and have a chat.
Sure. I mean, I can start. I mean, everything she heard is very standard and very expected, right? In my case, I am the primary caregiver to my mom and my dad. I have three brothers. The family dynamics come back into play. You know, I didn't live at home since I was 18. I'm 56. So, you know, those family dynamics come definitely back into play. And, you know, when you're unfortunately, sometimes when you're dealing with males, their ability to give is completely different. Not with all of them, but in my case, than the amount that I can give or want to give. And so those we've even when you might be the person who is giving the most and you are so essential because you are there all day long, all night long, whatever it might be in the doctor's offices, it's not just hard on you to go through that and have your heart broken 10 or more times a day because you're witnessing what's happening to your parents and you're hearing information that, gosh, you wish you could just cover your ears because you don't want to experience the end of life with your parents. On top of that, you have those family dynamics and you're getting questioned. Well, are you saying that or is the doctor saying that? You know, why are you making all of these decisions? No, you know, if you ask for financial help and it goes on deaf ears, and it goes on deaf ears, and it goes on deaf ears, to the point where you're like, there's no reason to ask anymore. You know, I think you go through this journey in caregiving of deer in headlights because it happens right away and you're not even expecting it or prepared, to expecting these high expectations of the other people around you and having that not happen, and then going through the attacks when you're not getting that support, but yet they know more than you do somehow. Not quite sure how, but um, and and so you and then you get to the point where you are exhausted, you are sick. A lot of us, you know, wonder if we can keep working. You know, I'm a consultant, so my hours go down, which means my finances go down, which means I'm creating a more financial issue on top of the health issues I'm creating on myself because I'm not taking care of myself. And you get to that breaking point, and then you step back and you say, okay, I need to recognize in myself what I can and cannot do, what parameters I have to put up for other people, how much breaks I need, but most importantly, what are my objectives for my parents? Because the number one thing that we always forget is we cannot prevent them from dying. And I'm going to say that again. We cannot prevent them from dying. It's going to happen. And there are 1,440 minutes in a day, and you cannot be there every minute of those days, every single day for the rest of their life. So you may not be there when it happens. And that's the thing you have to be okay with, because you can't prevent it. Even if you were there 1,440 minutes of the day. And so setting those objectives, which I have for my parents, is I want them to be as comfortable as they can, to get the best care from the doctors and be their advocate, bring them joy, and give them the essentials, a warm roof when they're cold, blankets when they're cold, or build the fire, and give them good nutrition and meals, and make sure they're eating and getting them out walking. And if I have to do that in pockets of the day, then that's what I have to do. Like, that's my day today. I had a 10-minute check-in with them this morning that I had to run to do some work. And then I went back and for an hour, clipped my dad's nails and toes, and then went back to prepare for this, and then went back to their house and cooked lunch, and then came to this today. And after this, I'll go at 6 o'clock and I'll check in and make sure they have dinner. But I've still made time for me, because I have to do my work. I want to do this, so that I don't get to that breaking point anymore. And I give them those things that they need and more of it when I can fit in the time. And I just think that it's really important to set those objectives, because that's going to take some of the weight off your shoulders, and just recognize that what your role is, it's not to prevent them from dying, it's to walk them on their journey the most comfortable way that you can.
So Mary, gosh, so a couple things just from what I have been hearing. We had, Kara, who kind of that line about, if you're going to martyr yourself for the greater good, right? And all falls apart, then what happens, right? And then you got Mary, where you're bringing up, you can't prevent them from dying, right? And so you can't care for them 24/7 to your own detriment. Both sides of quote unquote kind of the fence. This is awesome. What about Karen, Susan, and Dr. Zell and Kara, if you want to also, chime in, you're more than welcome to. But Karen for sure, Susan for sure, sharing your stories of your experiences, your expertise, and what you've heard so far from Kara.
So, go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead, Karen. I was just going to say.
So what Kara was talking about, we're going to talk over each other. Good. What Kara was talking about, of course, it makes perfect sense, and a lot of it I know now, and a lot of it I know in my head, but it doesn't always work in my heart. I'm laughing that I'm actually on a call that has the word calm and balance in it. Not sure how that happened or why, because I am neither. However, I am much calmer and more balanced than I was, 2 years ago or 6 years ago when this began. And when this began, I didn't know where to go. I mean, I was thrown into a situation where my dad was my mom's caregiver, and he was supposed to take care of her, and he dropped dead in the kitchen while pouring coffee. And, and we were thrown into this not knowing anything. I don't have children. I don't take care of anybody. I don't, but I do now, right? And I didn't have a social worker. I mean, I reached out to numerous of them. I reached out to care management and case managers, and nobody seemed to want to help. So I had a really bad beginning, in this chapter of my life. And, I have a lot of resources now. Because I'm an advocate, I can get the state ombudsman on the phone, or I can get, one of the top couple geriatricians on the phone. But it's still, I still feel like I have to do everything, and I still think I have to do everything. and with the doctors and all that. Like, I'm always like the middleman. Like, they can't seem to talk to each other. They have to talk through me. Um, it's an interesting process, but I do self care, and I don't think self care is selfish. It is necessary. For myself, I'm in recovery. I have to take care of my recovery, because if I'm not in recovery, then I can't help anyone. I meditate, I exercise, I take walks. I have alone time. All the things she talked about, which are super, super important. Um, and yet it's still very, very difficult to find balance.
Yeah, and like Karen was saying, the Karen's somebody who started off, obviously she just said it, not knowing anything, right, and just thrust into it. And like Kara said, there is no playbook. There is no, oh well, okay, Karen, for your situation, here's what you've got to do. And Karen took on that new territory, had to learn, and wow, has she taken what has what has happened and turned it into something with so much greater meaning. I love that, Karen. I love that. And Susan, you've got a story to share on one that's near and dear to my heart, since it has to do with mental illness.
Yeah, it's funny. I went through this with my daughter, and it was a whole different ball game. It was so difficult then, but I had more family support then. Then when my daughter had my granddaughter, and I ended up with her when she was 4, it was a few years later. She was in 5th grade and had to be hospitalized in a child psych hospital. And by then I was alone, divorced. My parents were gone. They died early. Her mother was homeless in the streets of Philly, and dad nowhere to be seen. So there wasn't a lot there, and I'm my only my only financial person is me, and so it was difficult trying to find balance and trying to find a way through the systems. And I got her through to the point I had to go through a legal system with children and youth to get her, because of the way my daughter just kind of took off. And I don't want to say stuck with her, but she left her with somebody and ended up going through the courts so I could get her at least to watch her. But it ended up to be a lot longer than I ever thought it would be, the rest of her life. And just trying to navigate everything. Some things were easier because going through the foster system, it did allow me to find some information. I had to take foster classes to keep her with me. But with that, I also got medical assistance for her and some help with childcare, which I never could have afforded on my own. Uh, and mental health has its own issues with the whole health system, because try to find a psychiatrist, let alone for a child. They are very, very rare, few and far between in this area. And to this day, there's still a lot of issues with that. But like I said, all along the way, too, there are people. I just kept learning and trying to find more things out. A blessing was that I was a nurse. I worked in public health. I was able to switch my job around so that I could work hours that worked for me better. I found a wonderful guidance counselor when she was in middle school that worked so well with me. That was so, I don't know, just having somebody like that to help you and understands. So, I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore, except for, just keep plugging in there, because there's stuff there you'll learn on the way. And, you know, I don't know, it just somehow you make it. And eventually I did learn to kind of just take care of myself, and speak up a little bit and ask somebody, maybe they could watch her for the day and I could go out with a friend, or do a work event or something. So I've gotten a lot better at that over the years too. So it's kind of a hit or miss thing, just learning as you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like what Kara said, right? Self-preservation, those micro movements. One of my favorite quotes is Albert Einstein has said, "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Right? We all know how that is. We all ride bicycles. So, yeah, this was brilliant. And I know, Kara, you still had more that you were going to share. So, unless Kara and add to what you heard? Or
So I like to share this quadrant in the next slide because we live in a culture that I don't think our nervous systems have ever been so active in constant alarms and pings and demands. And, we love independence, but that means you're the baker and the cook and the chef. I mean, you're doing all the things. And it's impossible to do everything well all the time. And so I liken it to, everything feels urgent and everything is not urgent. And so know yourself, know if you're kind of high strung and everything feels overwhelming. And then this chart really helps. And really, my favorite example is, urgent and important is if your bill is due tomorrow and you can't pay it. Urgent, not urgent. And the second quadrant, important, is you have a bill to pay in 30 days and you're not sure how you're going to pay it. It's important, but you have 30 days to figure it out. So you don't have to be doing it today frantically. And then my favorite one is number 3, which is other people's urgency, which is not yours. So people interrupting you, accepting every single call that comes in, answering every single email, the pressing matters of others. I think we all have people in our lives who call us whenever anything happens. And then, if you let it sit, by the time you call them back, they've figured it out. And then the fourth quadrant is not urgent and not important, and really the stuff that we waste our time on. And I just want to name perfectionism. Nothing is perfect. You're not perfect. And striving for perfection is the enemy of the good. So just really recalibrating expectations so that you can meet yourself in a more friendly, empathic way. Self-compassion can be key to getting through difficult times. And part of that is, I had a patient once who told me, and I fed my daughter nachos and mac and cheese. And I thought, well, sometimes, she ate. It's not the best meal, but she ate. And sometimes we have to think that way. Like, we have to get through the day. And sometimes you're eating nachos and mac and cheese for dinner. So next slide, please. This is a list of some resources. And as Paulina said, she's going to follow up with resources after this webinar. So you don't have to write anything down or look anything up unless that's your nature. So you're here, so you know about the Caregiver Resource Center. The Center for Healthcare Rights is an LA County service of HICAP, which is an acronym for a health insurance program that manages questions about Medi-Cal and Medicare. So if you're wondering if your person is qualified for Medi-Cal or Medicare, or when or how, you can call the Center for Healthcare Rights. If you have a drug program that is not sufficiently covering your medications and you want to figure out the better program, they can help you plug in during before, hopefully, open enrollment, which is coming up, so that you can change your Medicare drug program. And then I'm a therapist. I'm a mental health therapist. I know we live in Los Angeles where people will even say, my therapist told me, but not everywhere is that open to mental health support. But, you don't have to be crazy to need a therapist. I think, if you are human, you are going to have issues. And having issues and sucking it up is just another way to get sick. Reaching out and getting support is really important. And if you have health insurance, the best thing to do is go through them, because they have mental health. If you have mental health benefits, if you don't, there are sliding scale agencies. There are programs for people with particular needs or illnesses. But finding a safe place where you can really talk about what's going on, especially as Mary was talking about, if there are family dynamics that make it even more isolating and difficult. And then I'm a big proponent of meditation. We don't know how much time we have. We wake up every day thinking we have all the time in the world, and we do not know. Practicing mindfulness and presence allows us to be right where we are. And all we know is we have this moment. That's what we know. I'm here right now, and my hands are cold, or I'm recovering from a cold and my head is stuffy. The sun is shining. I know that to be true. And so practicing skills to get grounded in the present moment can be a lifeline. And there are apps out there. If you're in Los Angeles, there are many communities. Post pandemic, everything's on Zoom. You can access so many source services. And then social support groups. There are support groups for everything, for mental health, for caregiving, for illnesses, for codependence, for 12 steps, for all kinds of things. And you don't have to be alone and isolated. In fact, that's what's going on post pandemic is so many people are even more isolated than before. And I used to poo-poo the internet and Zooming and all the telehealth as a disconnect. But when you're talking about the demands of caregiving and the demands of traffic and illness, doing support groups online has been a lifesaver for many, many people. And then time management, figuring out how to manage all the things. And again, kind of going back to that quadrant, which is the last resource, is understanding what feels urgent to you and is it really urgent? Like slow down, step back and ask. I mean, it may be really gross in your bathroom, but nobody's going to die from that. It's uncomfortable, but we're not really good at being uncomfortable. And if you are a perfectionist and you're super driven and you've always had your I's dotted and your T's crossed, it can be really difficult to leave things in a mess or in a pile or undone. But it is not, you're not in a house with the curtains on fire. And so just being able to step back and say, ooh, I wish it were different. And it's uncomfortable, but it's not the end of the world. So I salute all of you for being here and showing up to get more information. And I hope that some of these resources can be helpful to you. And ask questions. Ask for case management from your insurance. Ask at your provider's office if there is a social worker you can talk to, or even at your insurance plan. And just keep asking questions when you show up and see what is available to you as you navigate these new territories. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wow. Kara, that was great. A couple of things I just want to put out there regarding support groups. So LACRC, for our clients, we have several support groups that you can tap into. You do need to be a client, right? But you can check on our website, and sign up for free. Start to get into the process and take advantage of what is available to you. I also am going to say. Uh, the whole concept of mindfulness and presence, and all we have is this moment, that was huge. And your discernment kind of quadrant, I think I for one am going to be printing that out and putting it above my desk, so thank you. I'm going to ask, because we still have more. We have Kara, we have Dr. Zell who's coming on. Thank you so much, Kara. Thank you to the Family Caregiver Authors. You'll be back. But let me just ask everyone who is watching, listening, put into the chat, what is one thing, just one thing or more if you want, that so far has really hit home for you? Maybe it's made you kind of think of something in a different way, shifted that perspective. Maybe it's one thing that you're going to take away from this entire conversation. Maybe it's one thing that you're going to actually post in your social media, right? To try and be part of that random drawing for the free book. But go ahead and put that in the chat. And while you do that, we are going to bring on our next expert, Dr. Monica Zell. Take it away.
Hi, Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Zell, and I am a palliative medicine and supportive care specialist. I work at USC, and I'm really happy to be here today and echo everything Kara has said about, just the to recognize and validate in yourselves that you're here, right? You're seeking out support, you're seeking out guidance and help, and that's really something to celebrate and recognize. So I want to just kind of share a perspective from someone who is a physician and sees people who are going through difficult illnesses and kind of illness trajectories, and often um, in a place where we think of the doctor's relationship with the patient, right? That's there, and primarily that is the relationship. But there are certain times and certain illnesses where that dynamic is a little bit shifted, right? And I will say that for many of the patients that I see, my primary relationship is actually with the family, with the caregivers. And that is where I think the benefit is because maybe the patient's not able to engage in a kind of meaningful way because of cognitive impairment or dementia or other kind of limitations. But that doesn't mean that um, we can't care for them, right? I view the family member, the caregiver, as really an extension. And so I do have a lot of experiences where this is really the case, and I view my relationship as a kind of a unit with the patient and with their family caregiver. So I'm hoping to just share a little bit about what that looks like. And we can go to the next slide. So just as an FYI, there is a session coming up. I don't know the exact date, but it's I believe, the last session, where it actually will go through kind of the specifics about palliative care and hospice and what the differences are and kind of how to navigate that. But I will just kind of share a little bit of an introduction, because some of you may have familiarity with the term palliative care and some may not. It's a relatively new specialty of medicine over the past 20 years or so. And it really means at its foundation, holistic and supportive care of people who have serious illnesses. And many people, both kind of in broader society, but also actually within the medical field, um, have a different association, right? A negative association with this field that it really is relating only to end of life care. And so if you take anything away from this, it doesn't need to mean end of life care only, that under kind of the umbrella of palliative care, there's more end of life care with hospice, and then there's non-hospice palliative care. But the association comes from, that's really where palliative care started. So over time, and with greater understanding of the benefit of this specialty for people who have illnesses and their loved ones, the field of palliative care has moved kind of earlier in people's, kind of medical trajectories. And however, it's important to recognize that palliative care is not one thing, and it comes kind of in many different flavors, which can be great, but it can also be a little bit confusing as well. Palliative care clinicians can work in the hospital. They can work outpatient in a clinic as kind of a specialist, like you would see your cardiologist or your infectious disease specialist. It's kind of a specialist clinic visit, or a specialist who also sees people in the hospital. There's home palliative care programs, which are a little bit different. And then some facilities will have some degree of palliative care presence as well, although less so usually. And sometimes it's available kind of earlier in a chronic illness course, kind of as something that can be continuity and support during the kind of in parallel as people continue to get treatments and see their doctors and specialists. And then sometimes it's really more towards the end as well. And a lot of these differences are based on just geographic different, availability, provider availability. There's a real shortage of palliative care providers because it's a relatively recent field. There's a wide variety of insurance coverage and what that looks like. And there's also, like I kind of mentioned, even within the medical field, there's a variable knowledge about kind of the potential benefits or even the understanding of what palliative care is and how it might help to get palliative care specialists involved earlier. In terms of my practice at USC, I work both in the hospital setting, seeing hospitalized patients often at times of great change and uncertainty. And then I have the privilege of getting to see people as a continuity provider over time, outpatient. I do telemed visits, but I also see people in person. And this happens because one of the patient's providers, often it's their primary care physician or their neurologist or their cancer doctor or other kind of specialist, will refer them to see me to be another part of the team with them. And I tend to think of myself or, my involvement, my role as kind of being an extra pair of eyes and ears to put my head together with the patient and their family to strategize together about how quality of life can be improved given the circumstances, right? Given that we're at a situation that no one ever expected or signed up for, right? And so I have actually, within my practice of palliative care, I've tried to carve out an even smaller kind of specialty or niche where I focus a lot of my time in seeing people with advanced neurologic conditions. So Kara and I work together a lot at USC. I see people with primary diagnoses like ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, advanced Parkinson's disease or other related conditions, sometimes multiple sclerosis, and then a lot of patients and families, patients with advanced dementia. And in my role, I really do have the privilege of getting to know patients and their family caregivers over time. So there's not that kind of urgency, and there's really the trajectory of the ups and downs. And I'll talk about some of the ways I kind of view the caregiver role and ways of trying to show up in a meaningful way and contribute to the patient and family caregiver's experience in a positive way from what I can contribute. Okay, next slide. And so as a palliative care physician, I have the privilege to walk alongside my patients and their essential caregivers through these challenging journeys. And so you can see on the right, this concept, this is kind of a core concept in palliative care of the concept of total pain. And we think of pain often as just physical pain, right? But this argues that there are multiple kinds of pain that we experience when we are the one who is going through illness or whether physical or mental illness. But there are also other kind of realms that are affected by different kinds of pains. The psychological pain that comes from having a serious illness, spiritual or existential pain, and then the social pain, kind of really this impact on your family dynamic, your social world, your relationships, your roles, your identity. And so I will share that I think this is a good place to share that I had the opportunity and the to read through the chapters that were authored by the family caregivers who are here with us today, Mary, Karen, and Susan. And I will say that what struck me was the sense of isolation and uncertainty and the feelings of being completely overwhelmed with the situations facing them that can so understandably come up when you're just thrust into this uncomfortable role of being a caregiver, for which no one gives you a clear guide or the places the stepping stones of how to navigate such a difficult roller coaster of ups and downs and all in between. So I could feel from their written words all the pain that they suffered, right? How their past experiences informed their perspective on being in a position now as an essential caregiver in this kind of crossroads in their lives. And there's no, Kara has already brought this up, and I think others have as well, that there's no algorithm for how to do this, right? There's no guide or um, how to guide or support someone through this. And often we look to clinicians and people in positions of authority or expertise for answers and expecting some clarity and ease. And often we're met with disappointment, right? Frustration and confusion, actually. And this is what I've personally experienced when I was a caregiver. I was a caregiver for my mom in my late 20s as she was dealing with cancer. And this is what I continue to hear from family members and essential caregivers of my patients who have serious illnesses and uncertain clinical trajectories. So if we go to the next slide, I will share that as a palliative care physician, these are the things kind of at the top of my agenda and priority list when I'm seeing patients who are less able to engage in their own care and patients whose care greatly depends on the care of from their essential caregivers. So really, like I kind of shared before, my relationship becomes more with the caregiver, sometimes more than with the patient themselves. And that's really because of the limitations, physically and kind of cognitively. And I try to really put value on their input and their daily experience as a caregiver, to try and work with them to strategize together how we can best support the patient and how to support them, right? Like what we're talking about today, because both are important, right? They're the advocate that wants to make sure the care of their loved one is being attended to. But I often am the one that says, okay, well, that's great. Let's talk about that. And let's also talk about how you're doing, right? And because that's very important too, because it's connected, and right, you can't disentangle the care of this patient or this person without also caring for yourself too. And in that, I try and empower them to promote things that are going to help with sustainability and resiliency, um, and exploring what they need from their providers. Often, and I saw this and kind of read this in the stories as well, the chapters from our essential caregivers here today, of feeling disenfranchised, of feeling not listened to, not feeling valued, not feeling, um, recognized or um, in their role, right? And so I often will tell families and caregivers that I view my role as kind of like a sounding board and an advocate. So then when I hear from them that they need something, I kind of help navigate with other providers if they're kind of within the same system, right? It helps at USC that we're all kind of in the same system, and I just talk to their providers. It's different in different systems, right? It's more challenging, I think, and we live in a country where our health systems are very fractured, right? They don't all talk to each other outside of, the Optum outpatient and USC and, different hospitals and kind of clinics. But that's how I view one of my, primary roles is actually as a voice and an advocate. Next slide. And then I will, if I can kind of, voice this loud enough, it's really that it's hard. I think why I'm sharing that these are kind of the overall things that I do is because I can't say this is the one thing that I do and this is my one piece of advice, right? Because how I approach each individual and their loved ones or caregivers is not an algorithm, and it's actually quite individualized. There are a lot of variable needs at play. And so just like everyone who is here today, you are going through something completely unique, right? Not just medically or clinically of your loved one for whom you are a caregiver, but because of who you are as an individual, who they are as an individual, what background and experiences you have faced in the past that inform how you show up to this present moment, right? experiences with the medical system, negative and positive, different resources at play, right? Different family dynamics and structures at play. And so all of these things are completely individualized. And so I will share that these are some of the things that I kind of try to broach when it is, appropriate, when I see patients or caregivers in different stages of their journeys, right? Sometimes I'm an MD. I'm prescribing medication for symptom management. Sometimes I am strategizing with them about action plans and resources and how to make it work, or how to start the process of looking for a hired caregiver, or you know, uh, at home, or starting the process of thinking about placement. Um, I'm sharing anticipatory guidance about what an uncertain future might hold and some of the things to consider along the way. And then, like I mentioned before, a lot of my role is actually providing therapeutic support to not just the patient, but often their caregiver, their family, in adjusting to this uncertainty, adjusting to the lack of control, the lack of the feelings of powerlessness people often feel, the changing roles, and the grief. I use the word grief because these are losses, right? That patients and families experience, right? A loss, we don't have to think of a loss as just the loss of a person, right? The death of a person. But in illness, right? People, families experience losses over and over again. And it really is important when you have a loss to grieve, right? To have space to grieve. And so that is a little fraction, kind of a little window into what I try to, where my perspective is, when I see people. And we can go on to the next slide. And this is kind of, I recognize that this is kind of just a tip of the iceberg, right? Of kind of all the challenges and barriers that patients and caregivers face with a very imperfect system, right? Our medical system is so complex. I often spend visits venting with families about all the challenges and the issues and the things that aren't covered and why it has to be so hard. This is unfortunately an inherent part of our system, and it's so difficult to change. And so we spend time kind of grieving and recognizing and normalizing that as well. And I will say, and this is not in any way to excuse kind of, behavior or care that doesn't feel like it's meeting your needs. But I will say that within this very difficult and imperfect system, that over time has moved so much more towards financial priorities rather than people priorities. The providers have it rough too. It is a real, there are strains kind of all around. So it's just important to recognize that. But again, it's difficult to kind of take that into context when you're stressed about the daily kind of pressures of caregiving, of advocating. And so it really does just share, and this is really to share that there are kind of strained dynamics all around. And so these things that I kind of listed as what you can do, these have already been mentioned, right? These are kind of the simple no-brainer kind of things, right? And they're not a band-aid, right? They're not a fix to the problem that's happening. About asking for resources, about coming prepared, having your questions, seeking, care elsewhere if you're not satisfied, advocating on a, really forceful level, like Karen has talked about. Um, Seeking your own support, which is a lot of what we've talked about up until this point. And then I think this has also been a theme that really that perfect is the enemy of good. So it's something to do with finding what is, and I liken this to kind of the quadrants that Kara showed, of trying to establish the urgency and priorities of and kind of coping strategies of how to kind of disentangle all of the chaos that you're facing, and realizing that I'm not going to be able to fix everything all at once. I'm not going to be able to do everything at once. And maybe I'm not going to be able to do these things perfectly, but am I kind of meeting my loved one's needs? Am I meeting my own needs? That is the goal to strive for, right? And that goal is a very vague and ambiguous goal, right? And it means something different to every single person. But what I am trying to um, empower you to kind of integrate and internalize is that this is going to be hard, and finding some balance in terms of good and not perfect, right? Because this is going to be hard along the way. That's really the what I have from my end. I think we can maybe come together now, and I hope that provides some help in some small way.
Yeah, gosh, how many people here on the screen as well as in the comments, wish Dr. Zell was their doctor? All right, show of hands, right? So, yeah, definitely. Just, from both sides of the fence. And actually, one of the things really kind of key to remember is the healthcare professionals, no matter who they are, they're still people, right? At the end of the day, they're still people. And that means that they aren't God. They don't have all the answers, right? And that they're doing the best that they can. And I think, Dr. Zell, you did such a great job of kind of outlining for us this balance, right? And this strategizing together, right? Not only for your own needs, but those of your loved ones. I love it. I'm wondering if, since we're all on here, if maybe the family caregiver authors can, you know, respond to what you just heard, number one. And number two, maybe also share some best practices that you might offer to those listening, right? Karen, I see your hand goes right up.
No. Well, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Zell. We all wish we had a doctor like that. I have found, after trying to deal with primary care physicians for my mom, that palliative care doctors and geriatricians are much better at doing what she's talking about. Primary care people are not really trained to deal with both caregivers and their, and their loved ones. And the fact that she said the caregiver is an extension, that's been my experience until recently, and I had to find the right fit. And then there's that balance in between, like, you need to talk to me because my mom doesn't always understand, but you can't ignore my mom because my mom, can tell. If you're talking to me and ignoring her, she does know that. And she will voice that. Also for me, we had palliative care for a little while and it was fantastic. The doctor came in and worked with me and my mom at her long-term care. And then after 3 months, they said, well, mom doesn't need palliative care anymore. Super frustrating to me. But I understand that's the system. I didn't communicate well with the doctors in the beginning because I was demanding and I was, you could see on my face how disgusted I was with the whole situation. I've gotten a little bit better, but my motto sort of is, if you don't ask, you don't get. Like, so, you have to ask questions. And I was just in a podcast that I work with a geriatrician. They talk about, like, I talked about how difficult I was, and she said, difficult daughters are a treasure. And I thanked her for that because that's what it is. But talked about how to communicate, to be respectful but clear, but I can't be a good partner if I don't have information. All these things that I'm learning now. But man, what a journey in trying to learn them. To learn them, to work with somebody in the system that doesn't often have the time, like appointments are like generally 15 minutes. Like that they, that I'm looking for the best care, and I'm the expert with my mom, and but I'm looking to you for guidance, right? And trying to find the best solution together. And those are things that have took me a really long time to learn, and I still don't do it all the time. But I appreciate Dr. Zell um, and her thoughts on this, and how she treats both the caregiver, who are essential, and the patient.
Well said.
Hmm.
Susan or Mary, you want to chime in?
Yeah. Um, I uh, I wish I had seen this conference like a long time ago for myself. I really liked a lot of what you said, and I related it to what a lot of things I did too. And with the healthcare system, it's funny for me because I'm in it, I work in it, but yet I had to learn things too. I can't say how many times I actually had to learn to speak up and go ahead and file that. Like if they denied something, to go ahead and file the I forget what you call it, so they can reassess it again, because they wouldn't cover some medicines, they wouldn't cover some outpatient, they wouldn't cover. But after going through appealing these things, it works. I got pretty much 99%, of what she needed, because just going through being denied the first time. And I don't know, just so much information for me. Like I said, I'm learning a lot here too, and it took several times too to go through therapists to find a right one. The first few, it did not work out at all. And the funny thing in the mental health system is the speaking to the caregiver is the problem. Not, you know what I mean? Because I could have her in the emergency at 14 and they don't have to tell me anything, but I'm obligated to sign that I'm responsible for her financial and everything else. So it gets frustrating. So that's what a lot of what I discussed with my granddaughter, and trying to find somebody too. And in fact, we still see the same psychologist that we started seeing years ago. She sees her, I see her, and when we had rough times, we could see her together. So that was a big thing too, because we had to live together and we had to work through this. And I'm no picnic to live with either. So, but yeah, and even the palliative care part of it too, I can kind of associate that with her, because I, I I I was putting expectations on her that I wanted, but I have to look at, if I look through it at that palliative care kind of thing, to make her comfortable, to do and give her what she needs. And like I think Mary had said, or just that comfort meal or whatever. Um, I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn to get off her back and just say, "This is who you are, and what can I do for you?" And for me, that was really hard because I'm a very controlling person. So, but I'm really so glad everybody's here, and just listening to everybody. It's awesome. Thank you.
And
Yeah,
we've
for
learned
me,
that,
I
right?
mean,
The stories. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Mary, because of all of you, like the more that we keep this stuff to ourselves, not only do we do damage to ourselves, right? We're suffocating because we're stuffing it down, but we don't have the opportunity to share with others and help them learn from our experiences. So again, super courageous for sharing your stories in the book, for coming on here and talking about your experiences, and then Dr. Zell and Kara. But go ahead, Mary. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
oh no, no problem. I guess so much just rings through to me, but I wanted to take a moment just to say, because I think I might come from a different perspective or a unique perspective. My chapter talks about my recovery from a substantial brain injury. And having that same family support system that I have for my parents, all boys, where I was my primary caregiver, because I had parents in their early 80s, and then I had three brothers. And so if there's others like me out there that have gone through, whether it's a cancer journey and you're doing it on your own, or even a brain injury or something else, and then on top of that you're caregiving for somebody else, it's really important to love yourself and be so forgiving, right? Even in the portion when it was just me I was caring for. And it's amazing. I look back and say it's amazing how I was able to advocate for myself and put in place 12 doctors to care for me on my own. But, one having a brain injury, in my head, there were two people. There was myself sitting on my shoulder before the accident, that brain was still there. But the one that was acting out life was Buford the dog. And Buford was a bloodhound. This is how I made it through. Buford was a bloodhound. And bloodhounds are the lovable dogs, but they're stupid as heck. And that's how my brain was, right? So I had to love my brain. I had to love Buford. And so that I could be forgiving of my progress in my healing and my journey. And if I couldn't do for myself as a caregiver, I had to be forgiving that I could only do what I could do, and I was doing the best I could do. Transform that to caring for parents. It's the exact same thing. You can only do what you can do, and you have to love yourself for that. And this whole thing of perfectionism has come up with both of the speakers today. And, when you're caring for someone, it does get tense. I had an instance yesterday where I couldn't bite my tongue anymore with my mom. She was not being nice. And yet I was the only one there, have only been the only one there caring for her, where I had to finally say, do you see anybody else here? Can you at least be nice to me? And say, the behavior you are giving to me is abusive. And even though she is not in good health, she needed to hear that. And a lot of times we bite our tongues because we're like, oh my gosh, this poor person, they're in their last years. You want to give them, the happiest you can, but not at your expense. There's a point where it cannot be at your expense. So that perfectionism has to go out the window. And even though I drove off last night and I felt like crying and I was upset at myself for getting angry at her, there was a tug of war in my brain saying, no, you were standing up for yourself. You were caring for yourself. It'll be better tomorrow because of it. And if not tomorrow, the next day or the next day when she forgets about it. Right? And so the other thing I'll say that's come up by both of them, both of the speakers, is getting mental support, emotional support. The best thing that I have done, because your friends and your family either get sick of hearing it or don't want to hear it, but you need to talk. You need to get it out. Like Paulina has said, it makes you sick if you don't. Find a therapist. Find someone who's actually been a caregiver and specializes in this. Because what I've found with my therapist is the biggest gift of all, is that I can say to her, okay, I'm making all these decisions. Could you at least tell me, am I right with this decision that I'm making? And she can give me examples and context for me to make that decision. Or am I insane when I'm yelling at my mom because she's been so awful to me? And she'll put it in perspective and say, no, that's you caring for yourself. And you need to, as a caregiver, hear that feedback, because this is the hardest thing you will ever do in your life. And there is no playbook, and you're going to hurt every single day 10 times over. It never stops. So then the one last thing I'll say is the gift that that therapist gave me as well is she said every morning, put your hand on your heart and say to yourself, thank you for taking this journey with me. And thank that girl inside, because this is difficult. And that helps every morning.
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful what everyone has shared here. We've been talking about perfectionism, right? And expectations. And I do want to just let you know we had so Mary, I love that you actually share giving yourself permission to be human, giving yourself permission to raise your hand and advocate for yourself, right? Even if you are kind of elevating your voice or whatever it is to your care recipient, that is so powerful, so empowering, and makes you a better caregiver. That said, I just want to maybe drop in the chat if we've got it. There is also a line, right, that potentially could be crossed, right? If again, if we're not talking to other people and getting it out, right? If we continue to stuff it down, at one point, just like a pressure cooker, we will explode. I know of what I speak of because I had that issue, kept stuffing down. Primary caregiver for a mom and a sister, both diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Didn't tell anybody, didn't seek out help, and I nearly destroyed myself and them. Don't do that, right? Not that is not something we're advocating here, right? So there are support groups, there's these free kind of workshops, etc. Let yourself be human. Let yourself engage with others, even if you're kind of lurking, right? You don't always have to kind of talk, right? But you can hear other people's stories. It's super powerful, and will really help you be a better caregiver for yourself and then for someone else. I wanted to. Oh, I was going to say we were. We had a session. Regarding elder abuse, mistreatment, etc., how to see those red flags, those signs. It happened November 6th. We will drop it into the chat. There is a replay and additional materials if anyone wants that. Please let us know in the chat. Also, we do have a question. I just want to make sure that we get out there. Here it is, so that all of you can answer. A question from the chat came in. Oh, and by the way, if you do pose a question in the chat, we've decided to add you to the random drawing for a copy of the Caregiver Chronicles book. So if you do have a question, drop it in the chat and we'll make sure to do that. This question is, how do I find a therapist who actually specializes in caregiving and aging? How do you go about doing that?
I can tell you for myself, it was talking to other caregivers and finding out from one of them who they, this caregiver, this therapist was. So that's what I did.
Kara, I think.
Because I have no control.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's anyhow. Thanks, Lindsay. There's a crisis of mental health in this country, and a lot of sort of like Dr. Zell said, we work within a system, and the system doesn't pay therapists, and they actually have clawbacks. They can come back 3 years later and say, pay us back. We don't agree with what you did. So a lot of therapists are not taking insurance. And so a lot of people who need therapy can't find a therapist. So when I get somebody who we can't treat in the clinic, I coach them about how to find a therapist. So if you're Google savvy, Google how to find a therapist. What is a good therapist? And if you can pay out of pocket, you can go to search websites like Psychology Today and search for insurance and search for specialties, and you can look for people who specialize in caregiver needs. As a provider, I know that people can list, they deal with all these things: couples, individuals, grief, depression. But then now there are specialties. And if you have a specialty, you are advertising it because you're saying, I work with a very distinct set of people. So I would say, talk to your providers, your doctors. Do you have good mental health resources in your system? Can you refer me? One, call your insurance. And again, most people need to start with insurance. So I would say call your insurance and get a list. And my recommendation is this: call every single person. And whoever calls you back is taking new patients. And whoever does not call you back does not get paid to call you and then be on the phone with you for an hour to figure out what you need as they listen to what you're going through. It is not personal. The system does not support us to support you. So, in the way that I work, I make time to call people and say, oh, we're not on your plan, or, but here's what you can do. So, just keep asking. Ask your providers, ask your caregiver support groups. If you don't have insurance for it, look for sliding scale agencies. Call the Caregiver Resource Center. If there's a university near you, call their psychology program, call their social work program, see if they have interns that you can work with. They're being supervised by professionals, so it may not be ideal. You may not think that somebody who's 20 can help you. You'll be surprised. In fact, I went to USC School of Social Work, and my very first internship, I went and did home visits with caregivers in their homes to provide counseling. And it was so enlightening. And I was not an expert, but I was human and I listened and I had a resource to go back to when I didn't know what to do. So do not underestimate the power of a good listener. Again, perfection is the enemy of the good.
That's awesome. And just to pipe in here, if you go to the LACRC website, on the right side, you will find a button for something called CareNav. So CareNav is a secure online service. You self-identify, you list out what you're kind of going through, you submit it, and it goes to an intake specialist who will contact you to go through an individualized plan. Now, I just want to let you know, just as we've been talking, right? Um, it it may take quite a bit of time, right? Several weeks, simply because of how many people really need help. But I do encourage you to do that. And for because we've been talking also about mental illness here, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they too, if you go to their site, you can submit through there, and ask these questions. Ask, because it's the only way you are going to learn. Yeah, Kara.
I just want to say one other thing. First of all, there's a support group for everything. So if you're grieving, look for grief support. If you're grieving a child, a parent, a sibling, if you are grieving from a suicide, if you are non-religious and you're trying to be sober, there are non-religious sobriety groups. There are meditation support groups. And I run a few support groups, and I just want to say, not every support group is for every person. If you go to a group and you're appalled because everyone's complaining, find another one. Don't just say, oh, groups aren't for me, because when you find your people, you will not be alone. And being a caregiver is one of the loneliest things you might do. So you need to find the people that speak your language. Don't give up.
Yeah, that wonderfully said. Dr. Zell?
I'm just going to add that there's also in the in the context of knowing how complex and difficult to attain mental illness support is, mental health support is in this country. I will say that it's good to be open to kind of less traditional options as well. I have one patient and family member who told me that the most helpful thing that provided support and reassurance and just feeling like they can relate to others was finding a Facebook group and then a YouTube series of someone who was talking about the same diagnosis that
Yep.
this caregiver's husband has, right? So they would watch these
Yeah.
YouTube video series about families that have Lewy body dementia, and this for this wife, this caregiver, this was game changing. She said, "Okay, now I get it. I get what other people are going through. I get what I can and cannot do. I see the spectrum of kind of what can happen and the changes to kind of look out for." And so this was free, right? This was just a free YouTube video series. So this is not to say give up on mental health support as well, but given the limitations and the barriers we face in our system, being resourceful and just Googling and YouTubing what you're looking for can be helpful too. There's a lot out there
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
free.
Brilliant. Oh, oh, I just wanted to say we have about 15 more minutes. So if you do have a question, drop it into the chat, right? We do have 2 questions that came in. This one says, Dr. Zell, how can information on palliative care be better and earlier disseminated so that we become familiar with the concept well before it is necessary?
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there. I wish, and it's so funny for the field of palliative care and the conferences, that I'll go to. Half the battle or half the kind of time is spent talking about how can we change the PR for this field, right? How can we,
Right.
change it so that the flyers aren't just, sad hands touching each other, right? And because um, they'll make the kind of comparison that other conditions that are not desirable, right? Their PR is not seeing what's actually wrong, it's showing what you want it to be, right? And so I'll say for Viagra, right? They don't show what's actually happening, they show what you want your life to be, right? And so that's just kind of a comparison of, how we can reframe um, palliative care as something that's a potential benefit to help people live better, um, given whatever the circumstances are. Um, and again, I think one of the challenges is how variable palliative care is in as a country, right? Geographically, based on insurance, right? It sometimes is overwhelming to try and describe even what it is because because it's not available for everyone, which is terrible, right? And this comes back to the concept of insurance companies kind of being behind, right? They are kind of, in their medication approvals, right? They'd never really approve medications that are already now well established as we use it for this, right? They're kind of back in the past. Same thing for kind of for specialty palliative care. Um, and then it also has to do with a supply and demand mismatch, right? So often in urban areas, there are more palliative care specialists and programs available, and much less so in non urban areas, in rural areas. Um, and so I would say that by attending things like this, where maybe some of you did just learn about what palliative care is and the potential benefit of it, that's kind of how these things get out, right? But I would also say that asking, searching on your insurance website for kind of potential resources, asking your primary care person, right? And so, but it's because of how kind of fractionated our system is. There's not one way to say this is how you learn about about the potential benefit and doing it earlier and involving someone earlier. I don't know. I hope that doesn't. I hope that doesn't cause kind of deflation of spirits by sharing that. But it really is a challenging system, and then this is a challenging kind of less understood box of within a challenging system. To kind of say it in a different way, but we're here, and now that you know about it, right? I empower you to kind of to seek it out, right, and to see what is available in your area. Kara, I see
I
your.
just want to add, thank you so much, Dr. Zell, and I'm just so honored to be your colleague. Um, I I think the key too is to just keep talking and asking questions, because I just personally went to see a specialist thinking it was going to be a checkup, and I told her what my issues were, and she said, I can do that. I just got certified in that. And she said, I don't think your PCP is going to give you what you need. And let me tell you, you need to find your allies in the system. And I often talk to people about, when you find a new doctor, and so you feel heard, you need to say, what's the best way to reach you? And how, do you do the portal? Do you do email? How can I communicate with you? You are building a system of support. You need to find your allies. So you know what palliative care is? Start dropping it. And I want to also say your providers are humans. They were raised in a culture that also doesn't talk about aging, sickness, and death. And they often look at you, because they're not trained not to project onto you, and see themselves and are horrified and cannot see your situation because they're caught up in their, oh my God, this sounds like my mother or my sister, or this could be me. And you don't get to monitor that. So if they are freezing in the view of your situation, you're going to be blocked from getting what you need. So keep moving through the system to find out who speaks your language and can respond to what your needs are.
And Karen, I think you had something you wanted to share?
Well, I just a few things to close on. I mean, my area is on improving long-term care, and I don't even know where to start. I will say that my mom can't. The more my mom can't communicate verbally, the more I am her voice, and so long-term care doesn't seem to realize that. When they cut us off during COVID, and I know that's supposed to be over, but it's not really over, and we still have issues trying to get in, and so you can train staff, but you can't teach empathy and compassion. Which is what I find lacking. Like I can list all the needs that they can't fulfill, but the one is the love that I have for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Essential caregivers, provide so much, particularly in the long-term system. We are unpaid and unrecognized. We provide emotional support. We provide personal care assistance. We save money. We save time for the healthcare system. Like all these things. So I would say if you care about advocacy, there's in California, there's California Canaher, California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. There's nationally, there's National Consumer Voice. There are several other advocacy organizations that if you want to get involved, that you can, because our voices need to be heard, and we are essential. Like I know things about my mom. My mom will tell me things she's not going to tell a stranger, right? She is not, and so as important as others are, I just need to stress that we are equally or not more important, to our loved ones. And the whole thing about ageism and ableism and and people not hearing because they don't care what people that are disabled or have dementia or elderly, don't have a voice, and after my mom is gone, I will continue to be that voice.
Yeah, and just as a reminder for all, Karen, thank you for that. As always, brilliant. November 21 is the session that deals with palliative care, long-term care, right? Hospice, all of the balancing of saying goodbye and the transitions. So know that that's free, but you do need to register. On our site, you will see the link probably pop up. We have another question. Is actually we have some questions about people who want to sign up with you all as doctors. So we'll leave that. Any questions we don't get to, we'll try to answer when we send out the replay information. But this question: is there a resource or organization that will guide you in navigating the Medi-Cal application process? I'm doing the best I can to apply for coverage my mom qualifies for, but the whole system is unbelievably confusing and frustrating.
That Center for Healthcare Rights that I mentioned should be able to guide you. I'm not sure if they'll do the application with you, but there are also independent living centers. I know you'll Google it, and then what you'll get is a bunch of advertisements. But if you look at the civil rights movement created the ADA for disability rights, and these agencies came out, and they are all over Los Angeles. And you might be able to see a benefits counselor at one of these agencies. They're called Independent Living Centers of California, and their disability rights agencies. They might be able to do that with you, or the Center for Healthcare Rights.
Anyone else have any suggestions if you've been through it? Yeah, it is very confusing.
There's
yeah,
also a program called Linkages. Each one is different, but if you look up linkages in the Los Angeles area and look for the one in your community, some of them will help you fill out paperwork, or even maybe go to a senior center.
Smart. Also, it just kind of dawns on me, we're talking about all this stuff, and number one, I love when Dr. Zell was talking about, needs a better PR campaign, right, for palliative care, and all of these things, right? Actually, knowing, being able to message what something actually is and the steps to go about getting it. I also know that there is a fear, and I know I shared the fear when I was family caregiver, of how do you pay for stuff, right? How do you balance all of this with your checkbooks, your checklists, etc.? And I want everyone, I want to encourage everyone on November 19th. That's our next session. We have the balancing of the biz of caregiving, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these kinds of issues, especially, as Mary was kind of talking about a family that you may have a lot of people in your family, but surprise, you're it, right? And nobody else is stepping up to the plate. What do you do now to ensure you have all the paperwork in place, everything you need in place? Susan was even kind of sharing, and I struggled with this too. You are not allowed to get certain information when someone is of a certain age, right? And it is not an easy conversation to have, right? But balancing that business of caregiving now, when everyone is more able to speak to it, will save you so much, not only financially but also in the headaches and the heartaches, right? So that's taking place November 19th. Okay, we have a couple of minutes left. Any quickie last words from anyone before we kind of close out? Or we want to do a round robin and last words? What you hope people take away from this?
Sure.
Mary, you were nodding first.
Oh, go, Mary.
Yeah.
Go, Mary.
Another thing from my great therapist, she just said, go softly. And there's actually a book out there about that, and that's what I would say to everyone, go softly, meaning be easy on yourself and take good care of yourself.
Good one. Karen, you wanted to?
Just, for me as an advocate and an activist, just remember that, like I said before, like families and residents deserve a seat at the table. I was certainly frustrated over the last couple of years of all the panels that I listened to, and no offense, Zell or Kara, they are wonderful people and wonderful advocates, but we deserve a seat at both residents in long care, members, self and expert too. And that's all I have right now. Thank you everyone for participating. It was very, very. I hope.
So I think Karen froze up a little bit there. Maybe, I hope, was it just with me or?
Oh, I think I did.
Oh, we're good? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's good. It was just me. Operator error, as my husband always says. Okay. Susan or Kara or Dr. Zell? Last takeaways?
Oh, I go to a lot of 12-step meetings, so I'm used to muting. But yeah, the takeaway is don't give up for me. When I got frustrated, I had a friend. Maybe she didn't even really understand exactly what I was going through, but we would help each other just by saying, I need 5 minutes to vent. And just sitting there saying what I had to say to an objective person that I don't have to take it out on anybody else. It would be good. I'd take a breath and go back again. So that's when I learned to meditate a lot too. But just hang there and ask for help when you need it.
Good one. And then we have.
I'll just say I want to kind of swing back to what Mary said and kind of tease in all these other pieces, which is, go gently with yourself. And, some days you do quit. I like to say, have a pajama day. Like, who knows if you're in your pajamas all day. And sometimes you need a break. And sometimes you need to dance to your favorite music or stay in bed all day or whatever the thing is. You don't have to do all the things all the time. And that self-compassion is real. You can tend to yourself with kindness. You don't have to drive yourself into the ground with a critical mind. And avail yourself of the resources that you can access, and keep asking questions. And again, you're already ahead of the game if you showed up or if you're watching this.
Good one. And Dr. Zell?
It sounds cliche, but I really do think it's quite relevant to just remind yourself that this is going to be hard, right? It's not what anyone signed up for, and you really want to face it like it's a marathon and not a sprint. And so that means pacing, that means taking breaks, that means putting the gas on during some periods of kind of more elevation or kind of changes, right? Of but knowing in those times that you're gonna need to pull over and get gas and refuel, to go with this analogy, but really just to think of it as a long road, right? And so when you think of it as a long road, it kind of makes it a little bit less daunting, maybe not so much. But meaning that you can only nibble off a little bit at a time. You can't fast forward time. You can't um, go backwards, right? And you're kind of in the here and now, but you're seeing the road ahead. But you can only just drive as fast as you can, and know that the trip is long, so that you have to pace yourself. Is
Yep.
some kind of cheesy analogy, but it really does kind of ring true.
That was a great analogy. And I will lend as my little takeaway: start practicing disappointing people. That's a big thing with me. And I know it sounds really kind of silly, right? It's laughing. Oh, I can't do that. But in my own experience, thinking that and not even thinking, knowing that I knew more, right, and that I could do it faster, and that I was the one who, let's say, had my little red cape on, like Superwoman, right? it it never dawned on me until I started doing it that if I practice disappointing people who are asking me to do things, asking me to take things on, I'm thinking I'm blowing up their world, right? But the truth of it is, I'm not that important, and they will find another way. So, using what Kara had, that kind of grid, the discernment kind of grid, right? Actually deciding what is it that you want to do? What is most important to you? What is urgent? Using that kind of a grid, and then literally disappointing people and saying no. Learn to say no. No is a great word, and you don't even have to explain why, right? So, with that, goodness, we are out of time. This kind of flew by. I think this is awesome. Put an amen into the chat if you loved this as much as I did and learned so much from this and wished we had even more time to share. Thank you to Dr. Zell, Kara, Susan, Karen, Mary, you guys have been phenomenal. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Please do visit our website, losangelescrc.usc.edu. You will find a ton of free resources. Sign up for the newsletter so that you are informed with whatever we've got going on. Make sure that if any of our individual sessions coming up intrigue you, those you have to register for. They are all free. We'll find them on our website under the CALM events kind of link. As I said before, our next session is November 19, all about balancing the business, legal, financial. We'll be talking about conservatorship and more. Make sure that you register. Remember to share us on social media. If you do, email us so that you can be entered into the drawing. You are essential. You are. And we here at the Los Angeles Caregiver Resource Center hope to help you in your caregiver journey, wherever, whatever that means for you. So until we see you again, on behalf of USC and the Los Angeles Family Caregiver Resource Center, I'm Paulina Milana, and I thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Honey, I got what you want. Give me all of your love, 'cause it's burning hot.